A Chinese state-owned media is using its strongest language yet to threaten the U.S. This after Beijing simulated an invasion of Taiwan in a military exercise. The president of the Philippines announces his country's friendship with Communist China is over. He tells Beijing, "Kill me if you want to kill me. I will be here." One Chinese mother suddenly goes radio silent after vocally demanding justice for her late son. What's behind the dramatic change? The U.S. suspends visas for certain Chinese communist officials and their families. Reports say one Chinese undergraduate just got rejected for an American visa because that student's father works for China's Ministry of Public Security. And 2 of 5 American businessmen in Hong Kong want to leave the city. The biggest reason? The Chinese Communist Party's suppression of freedom there. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A Chinese state-owned media is threatening the U.S. using its strongest language so far. It's saying that China will be able to defeat the U.S. in a war if the war happens in China's waters. This after Beijing simulated an invasion of Taiwan in a military exercise. NTD's Don Ma has more.
The possibility of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan may be more likely than ever. This as the Chinese regime's People's Liberation Army, or PLA, simulated an invasion of the island last week. The PLA Navy practiced one of the most important maneuvers needed to invade Taiwan. That is, beach landing drills. Taiwan is surrounded by water, so an invasion by sea is one of the only methods. The PLA Navy released a video showing that the exercise involved an amphibious military transport dock, landing crafts, and armored vehicles. The Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, has never ruled Taiwan, but has long claimed it as its own territory, and has never ruled out annexing it by force. Chinese state-owned media Global Times says the exercises are to prove to foreign countries that China has the ability to conduct a reunification by force operation on Taiwan. It says these exercises act as a deterrent for foreign forces who provoke China. Despite the warning, the U.S. and its allies conducted joint military exercises the following day. The week-long exercises aim to counter Beijing's aggression in the region. The U.S., Japan, Australia, and France participated. The drills took place on Japanese soil and surrounding waters and were the first of its kind. They involved urban warfare and amphibious operations, including the defense of remote islands. The Chinese state media was quick to denounce the joint exercises. It called the exercises insignificant. It also doubled down on its previous threat to Australia, saying that Australia will be the first to receive a missile attack if it interferes in a conflict over Taiwan. The state media also issued its strongest threat yet to the U.S. It said, with China's strength, it needs to make the U.S. be increasingly sure that if the U.S. launches a war with the People's Liberation Army in China's adjacent waters, it will be defeated. Don Ma, NTD News.
In his strongest language yet, Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte says he will not yield to Beijing in the South China Sea. In a televised address on Friday, he said, "I will not back down. Kill me if you want to kill me. I will be here. Our friendship will end here." The statement comes against Beijing's call for the Philippines to withdraw vessels from disputed waters in the South China Sea. The Philippines recently boosted its presence in its waters in the defiance of incursions by Chinese ships. Last Wednesday, Beijing sent close to 300 ships into the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. And Duterte says, "We have a stand here, and I want to state it here again. We will not move an inch backward." The Chinese regime self-proclaims over 90% of the South China Sea. This despite a 2016 ruling labeling the claims unlawful. Last week, the Philippine military also announced plans to turn islands in the South China Sea into military hubs. One Chinese mother has suddenly gone radio silent after vocally demanding justice for her late son. We look into what's behind the dramatic change and why she believes his death wasn't an accident. Here are the details.
The mother of Chinese high school student Lin Wei-chi has been silent on social media for close to a week. Her son was a 16-year-old high school student in southwestern China's Chengdu City. He died mysteriously at school on Mother's Day. Lin's mother first broke the news on Chinese social media Weibo, and it soon became one of the most trending news topics in China. She used to speak very vocally about this incident, posting multiple times on Weibo every day. But the mother disappeared from the public eye last Tuesday and has not posted anything since. Her last message on Weibo says she was determined to get to the bottom of how her son died. Lin's school claimed that Lin took his own life by jumping off a campus building. Local authorities also said the same. But his parents didn't believe that's what happened. Lin's mother said her son wished her Happy Mother's Day that day and showed no signs that he was planning to commit suicide. She wrote, "My son was happy and energetic when I sent him to school. Then the school told me such a big thing had happened, and they announced their conclusion in such a hasty manner, within just an hour." Lin's body got cremated at a local funeral home, but his death still remains a mystery for his parents. Many people in China are also speculating how Lin had really died. The Chinese regime mouthpiece CCTV later aired the surveillance footage of the school, but many Chinese netizens are questioning the authenticity of it. Netizens point out that Lin was the only one in the footage wearing a mask. The other students didn't. The netizens ask, would Lin be afraid of catching the virus if he were to take his own life? They suspect that the person in the footage might be an actor and question whether the mask was actually meant to conceal his identity. The school said that Lin committed suicide around dinner time, but netizens point out that's usually when students would chat with one another and play basketball. But in the footage, the school looked almost empty. Chinese media said Lin had a visible wound on his wrist because he tried to cut his own wrist to commit suicide. But netizens point out that Lin was not bleeding in the footage at all. A netizen also asked why they released the video days after the student had died. The netizens suspected that's because the school had to take some days to find an actor and shoot the video. What's more, surveillance footage of Lin's alleged jump is still missing 1 week after his death. Authorities said there is no camera at where he jumped. That's why many people felt that many questions are still left unanswered. Last week, large numbers of protesters gathered in front of the school. They demanded that authorities tell the truth about the incident. Reactions on Chinese social media are divided. A Chinese publisher and book editor commented that authorities should bury those protesters alive or beat them up. He said the police must suppress the protests and prevent what they call a color revolution. His remarks created a backlash in China. A retired Chinese professor described the publisher as a terrorist and criticized him for being heartless.
A new surge of virus cases is dealing a heavy blow to 2 Chinese provinces. Local officials there are trying to shift blame elsewhere in a last-ditch effort to stay in power. Here are more details.
The Chinese media says nearly 20 areas across China still pose medium risk of CCP virus infection as of Monday. The country's northeastern Liaoning province accounts for 10 of them.
You can't enter Xiongye town now. You simply can't come in. The entire town is under lockdown. The pandemic is very serious now.
The situation in Liaoning province isn't unique. New confirmed cases have also appeared in Anhui province, home to the other 7 medium-risk areas. But multiple cases in both provinces reportedly have a common denominator. They've been linked to training sessions at a photography studio in Liaoning province. The new information has prompted people in Anhui province to pin the blame on Liaoning for the new wave infections. Last Friday, Anhui authorities issued a notice. It claims a woman from Liaoning province may have had contact with people from outside China, got infected, and then spread the virus to someone in the capital city of Anhui province. But Liaoning authorities immediately denied the accusation, noting that the woman had not been in contact with anyone from overseas. Despite their efforts to shift blame, several officials in Liaoning province are being held responsible for failing to contain the virus spread there. On Sunday, health authorities and law enforcement officials from Liaoning's hardest-hit city received penalties or warnings. Some of them were fired. Those in Anhui are also facing punishment. The regime shut down several healthcare centers there, known to provide healthcare services to fever patients without authorities' permission. A physician there is also accused of illegally practicing medicine. A Chinese virus expert says the situation is still puzzling as to how patients from these 2 provinces caught the virus. So far, Chinese authorities reported having dozens of CCP virus cases found in these 2 provinces in May. But due to China's lack of transparency and the CCP's history of covering up its infection rates, it's unclear how many people are actually sick in there. Chinese media didn't disclose whether the virus found there is the new variant, which is known to spread faster. But people familiar with the issue in China told us the cases are due to the new strain.
From the lap of luxury to a prison cell, Tibet's richest man finds himself in an unexpected situation. It's all because he reportedly offended China's communist leaders. Here's more on that.
A former Tibetan millionaire has ended up behind bars, where he'll likely spend the rest of his days, all for allegedly insulting high-profile officials in China's Communist Party. Entrepreneur Dorji Tashi was once the richest man on what's sometimes known as the roof of the world, Tibet. A source familiar with the matter described what happened behind the scenes.
During a Tibetan riot in 2008, the deputy director of public security and the city of Lhasa's mayor tried to get the two of them, Tashi and his brother, killed.
Wang explained that the two communist officials likely took issue with Tashi and his brother years ago, after they declined a request from the officials. Wang suspects this years-long grudge may be the real reason behind Tashi's arrest. At the time, the mayor requested that Tashi publicly defame another local official, but Tashi refused. In addition, Tashi's brother also turned down a senior policeman's demand for a free house. At the time, Tashi worked as a property developer. In retaliation, Tashi was sentenced to life in prison for what officials called committing loan fraud over a decade ago. But Wang says the verdict is wrong.
Even the bank that lent him money denies that Tashi committed fraud. They trust each other after having multiple transactions, and he eventually repaid the loan in full, including interest.
After his arrest, Chinese authorities seized all his assets, an equivalent of over $600 million. That's including a hotel in Tibet's capital city, Lhasa.
Tashi had pleaded not guilty until now. The former mayor of Lhasa asked the prison guards to torture him. Tashi has mostly been serving his sentence in solitary confinement, and he has many health problems.
Wang added that Tashi suffers from diabetes and high blood pressure as a result of years of physical abuse in prison. To get out of jail, Tashi appealed the court's decision twice.
Their family lost all their appeals. No one can defend him in court. As soon as he finds a lawyer, the officials will begin to intervene.
Wang noted that Tibetan authorities ordered Tashi's defense lawyer to stop representing him. The verdict orders Tashi to spend the rest of his life in jail.
Companies in China are suffering as the prices of raw materials there surge. The increase has been especially hard on small and medium-sized businesses who are grappling to survive. Since July of last year, materials used in construction and renovation have skyrocketed. It's affected everything from concrete to wiring to plumbing. But it's not the only sector left crunching numbers. In the food industry, soybean oil and canola oil serve as crucial varieties of cooking oil. The cost of them has doubled since last year. Chinese media outlets report that out of nearly 60 major commodities, half of them have increased by more than 10% since March. 11 of them rose by more than 30%, and some have increased by more than 50% during the year. The price of copper, a widely used construction material, has doubled since last year. Chinese news reports reveal that many small and medium-sized companies have been forced to cut production. The head of a cooking oil manufacturer said he dares not raise prices too much. Rising prices lead to declining demand, effectively handing over market share to competitors. The price increases have also prompted another layer of difficulty, causing slowdowns and delays to an economy still trying to recover from the pandemic. Coming up, the U.S. suspends visas for certain Chinese Communist officials and their families. One Chinese undergraduate freshman just got rejected for an American visa because that student's father works for China's Ministry of Public Security. Hear more on that after the break. Beijing is acknowledging that the U.S. has suspended visas for Chinese Communist officials and their families. The new visa curb applies to officials working at 4 major regime agencies involved in human rights abuses.
Beijing confirmed that the U.S. is rejecting visa applications from the family members of Communist Party officials. A spokesman for China's foreign ministry confirmed the news in a press conference on Thursday. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has ordered the suspension of visas for active members of 4 Communist Party agencies: the China's Immigration Bureau, the State Supervisory Commission, the Ministry of State Security, and the Ministry of Public Security. The order also extends to officials' family members. The policy impacts visas for business, tourism, study, and exchange. The new restriction seems to have already taken effect. A Chinese undergraduate freshman was reportedly rejected by the U.S. Embassy. The student's father works for China's Ministry of Public Security. The note from U.S. visa officers also mentions the rejection of family members and spouses was issued as per U.S. State Secretary's instructions. A spokeswoman for the Chinese aide says she's just received the related updates. She explained, "I just read about the information. My colleague sent me a U.S. visa alert. It reads that the issuance of visas for the people mentioned and their immediate families are suspended." A week earlier, Blinken's 2020 report on international religious freedom said Chinese citizen Yu Hui would be denied entry to the U.S. along with his immediate family. Blinken cited Yu's involvement in Beijing's widespread persecution of Falun Gong, a spiritual meditation practice founded in 1992 that teaches the principles of truth, compassion, and tolerance. Yu Hui was the director of the former 610 office in Chengdu City, Sichuan Province. The office was set up by former Chinese Communist Party head Jiang Zemin for the purpose of persecuting and eradicating Falun Gong. The practice was deemed illegal in 1999 out of fear that its teachings and widespread popularity would promote a more free-thinking moral society and lead people to question the Communist Party's ultimate authority. Currently, the U.S. has sanctions levied on dozens of Chinese Communist officials for their human rights abuses, including the persecution of Falun Gong and the suppression of Hong Kongers, the Uyghur ethnic minority, and other dissidents. The sanctions ban U.S. entry to these officials and their immediate families. Those blacklisted may also have their U.S. assets frozen, with other financial penalties.
A new survey found that 42% of Americans in Hong Kong's business community plan to leave the city. The American Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong, or AmCham, conducted the survey among its members earlier this month. The chamber says the international business community in Hong Kong is being caught at a crossroads, partly due to rising U.S.-China tensions. The survey found that a number one reason respondents want to leave is because of Hong Kong's new national security law. Beijing imposed the sweeping law on Hong Kong last year. Under the law, the city's autonomy has deteriorated. Authorities arrested numerous Hong Kong pro-democracy activists. The law is also applicable to anyone in the world, even if they are not Hong Kong residents. A respondent that plans to leave Hong Kong told AmCham that with the national security law, the red lines are vague and seem to be arbitrary. "I don't want to continue to fear saying or writing something that could unknowingly cause me to be arrested." 48% of those wanting to leave say they will do so in the next 3 to 5 years. A slight majority, or 58% of respondents, say they don't plan to leave Hong Kong. AmCham collected over 300 responses for the survey. That's around a quarter of their membership. Beijing claims that Confucius Institutes are not under the regime's control, but a Confucius Institute director in Canada dodged questions about the Tiananmen massacre while testifying in Parliament. NTD's Becky Zhou has more.
The Confucius Institute director at Canada's Carleton University claims his institute is independent of the Chinese regime's control, but he stumbled over questions about the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre while testifying to the Canadian Parliament. A Canadian lawmaker asked him whether he thinks it's wrong for the Chinese regime to shoot peaceful protesters.
My employment is with Carleton, and I don't think it has anything to do with China.
Last Monday, Lee testified in front of the Canadian Parliament Committee on Canada-China Relations. He has been working at the Confucius Institute for 10 years. Lee was in Beijing when the massacre took place more than 3 decades ago. Unarmed student protesters gathered to ask for democracy, but the Communist Party ordered troops in Beijing to open fire on them. The Chinese Red Cross estimates that the troops killed about 2,600 peaceful protesters. The Canadian lawmaker then asked Li if he believes the death toll is accurate.
I don't have this expertise and knowledge to validate the number of that incident.
Li claimed that his institute is independent and that he only reports to Canada and to Carleton University. But he admitted the institute receives funding from its head office in Beijing. A Chinese regime agency affiliated with the United Front Work Department provides funding to Confucius institutes around the world. A former employee at the top Canadian intelligence agency told lawmakers last month that Confucius institutes function as spy satellites to gather intelligence for the Chinese Communist regime. He testified in front of the same Parliament committee, saying the Confucius Institutes are one of the front companies for espionage Beijing has created in Canada. Reporting by Becky Zhao, NTD News.
New Zealand police are concerned about the Chinese drones they use. Their report says Chinese-made drones are potential backdoors for Beijing surveillance efforts. These small flying devices could send data to a server located in China. The company behind the drones is China's Dalian Innovations, or DJI. DJI currently dominates the global market. Their products account for 70% of all drones worldwide. The company is based in Shenzhen, China's Silicon Valley. In 2017, the Chinese regime rolled out a law that forces China-based companies to share data with the regime upon request. That same year, the U.S. military warned against using China-made drones. The Australian and the New Zealand military did the same. New Zealand-based aircraft specialist Andrew Shelley told local radio station RNZ his recommendations: police should use the drones without Wi-Fi. New Zealand police are currently using these drones to photograph crime scenes and traffic accidents. In February, they returned a missing hiker to her family using remote-controlled aircrafts. The Chinese regime may boycott an upcoming Marvel movie. Oscar winner Chloe Zhao will be directing it. China's state-run Central Television recently aired a list of U.S. release dates for many upcoming Marvel movies. But there's a noticeable omission: the release date of Zhao's movie, The Eternals. Zhao recently became a controversial figure in China. That's for a comment she made back in 2013. She told a U.S. film magazine that China is a place where there are lies everywhere. A lot of info I received when I was younger was not true. Since her comment came to light, the Chinese regime has boycotted her. They censored information regarding her recent Oscar win and her Golden Globe win. Beijing also pulled the Chinese release date for her award-winning movie Nomadland. And that's all for today's China in Focus. But before you go, China in Focus is partnering with the Epoch Times newspaper on their new subscription-based streaming platform, Epoch TV. That's where you can watch our exclusive special reports like this one every Friday night. And then we'll explore questions like where the CCP virus actually came from, how China lures foreign companies in, steals their technology, and kicks them out, how the CCP is actively collecting the world's people's healthcare data, how the ancient Chinese philosophy of good governance differs from the current-day communist regime, and much more. Be sure to check out these investigative episodes by clicking on the link in the description down below. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you really want to understand what's happening with China. Meanwhile, you can still watch our Monday to Thursday episodes for free on YouTube, NTD Cable TV, the NTD website, and the Epoch TV website. In the latest report we discussed, we look at what's going wrong with U.S. carmaker Tesla's love affair with China. Once a darling for the Chinese regime, Tesla is now facing an unprecedented attack from Chinese regulators and state media.
They do this every single time.
The better Tesla's development, the more nervous the Chinese regime will become.
And what does the saga have to do with the Chinese Communist Party's ambition to dominate the next generation of technologies? To find out, watch our episode aired last Friday on Epoch TV. Thanks for watching, and see you tomorrow.